Okay, so this is going to be a little brainstorming session to create your, to figure out what your symbolism is for your symbolic portrait. So step one is going to be, what are symbolic items that represent your identity? So some examples of that could be, what are you passionate about? What are your hobbies or things you like to do? What about you is unique? What do you want to be when you're older? What is or are your favorite colors, etc. Okay, so be thinking about some different things that represent your identity. This could also be cultural things. Okay, so what is your cultural heritage? That could definitely be brought into it, just like Frida Kahlo's was. Okay, so step two, how or what can you use to symbolically represent these ideas? So for some examples, following the same ones I used up here, I am doing some examples for my personal one. So first of all, my first one, I'm passionate about art. So I could use images of art supplies or typography, or I could draw them. Hobbies, so I have a love of plants. I could create a collage using different types of plants, or draw one big one as a background. What about me is unique? I am a female INTJ, which is very rare. If you're not familiar with what that is, that's the MBTI personality test. My favorite colors are green, pink, turquoise. And then I have out here to the side, maybe only use these colors, question mark. So these are kind of my thinking out loud to myself of maybe I will use just this color scheme, or maybe I'll incorporate it into it in some manner. Okay. So using a specific color palette is a good idea if you want to have unity and cohesion with your final project. Okay, so step three is practice drawing these items in your sketchbook, or you can find images of them in magazines. So if you have some magazines laying around your house that aren't being looked at anymore, feel free to cut images out and collage them just like you did with your sketchbook project at the beginning of the year. Or also in parentheses here, I put print pictures from internet, but only use copyright-free images. Okay, so if you type in royalty-free images in Google, that will give you a list of those. Okay, so make sure that you're using copyright-free. Step four, what medias do you want to use? So for example, this is what I'm going to use for my project that you're going to see me create in just a few minutes. I will use collage for the background, acrylic paint, watercolor paint, paint markers, and fine liner pens. Now this is my brainstorming. This is what I'm thinking I'm going to use, right? So I may change this, or I may add to it. Okay, so just keep in mind that's an example to kind of get you to think about what it is you want to use and or can use. So if you're using what you have around the house, you may not have all these things. You may only have 2 or 3 things. So feel free to use what you have. Okay, so the last little paragraph here says, be sure to experiment with them in your sketchbook before applying them to your final artwork, especially if you're not familiar with them. That way you can kind of figure out what they do in your sketchbook rather than ruining your final artwork. Okay? Okay, so here is my project sketch that I did in my sketchbook to get prepared for my brainstorming for what I'm going to do for my project. So I started out with drawing a rectangle that's approximately the shape of the surface that I'm using to create my art on, which is the substrate. Okay, so it's going to be a thick cardboard that is approximately 7.5 by 10 inches. Okay, so then I went through and I just kind of did a little quick sketch of what my idea is. So I plan to do a collage background. Okay, so I have that written out here, and I'm thinking that I'm going to use the scrapbook paper that has plants, images of plants on it, maybe some moons, and then maybe even incorporate some of my favorite colors. Okay, so then this one down here says self-portrait, straight on with partial shoulders showing. So this is kind of just to give an overall idea of what type of portrait I'm doing. Am I doing one that's straight on? Is it going to be, you know, are you going to be angled to the side? So kind of think about that as far as what type of representation you want to make of yourself. So, and you'll need to take a photo accordingly, or find a photo that you already have of yourself like that. Okay, so over here on the left side, I said use gesso to make background cohesive. So you'll see that in the video in a minute to see what I mean by that, but I'll explain that in the video in a minute. And then here I said maybe use favorite colors like bursting out from behind me, almost like a colorful aura, or also just to, you know, that kind of is my love of art and paint, so that's kind of my representation of that. Okay, so down here you're going to see that it says, like I said, the substrate. It tells me, so think about what you have available to you that you can use, and you want to make sure that be trying to find something around your house that has that. The materials needed, this is kind of just to give myself an idea of what I'm going to want to use as well as what I need to be able to do the project. So the first one is a sturdy substrate. So remember, that's the surface, so that's what I'm actually creating the artwork on. I also said scrapbook paper / magazine cutouts. So if you don't have scrapbook paper at home and you do have some magazines, then you could use that instead of the paper like I did. Mod Podge, so this is going to be your glue. This is how you're going to glue the collage paper onto the surface. And then I said also a brush to apply. And then gesso, so this is going to be what is on a stretched canvas, the white that's on there. What it does is it is a porous material that allows things to be painted on easier with paint. So it's not a requirement, but you can use acrylic paint in its place, and we'll talk about that in the video, the demonstration. And then also medias that I am thinking about what I'll be using. I know I'll be using acrylic paint, more than likely using fine liner pens and possibly the paint pens and gel pens. And then over here I kind of put ones that maybe, they may not be for sure, but charcoal and watercolor paint. Okay, so this is obviously going to depend on what you have at home, but you need to maybe go through and take inventory of what you do have so that you can think about how can you incorporate these to make a really nice artwork with it. Okay, so this is kind of about the idea what your project sketch should look like and the planning and steps involved to figure out all that you're going to need to be able to do the project. Okay,